Expo Router has become the go-to navigation library for new React Native projects, and for good reason. The Expo team is absolutely shipping. The latest version of Expo Router fully supports Apple's new liquid glass design system. Fully natively, we are talking about bottom accessory, zoom transitions, native bottom sheets, toolbars, and more. But what about Android, right? Expo Router has fully native integrations like material tabs, surface colors, material symbols, and other native features. And when you combine that with Expo UI Jetpack Compose, you can build Android apps that feel like first-class citizens of the platform, all while still working nicely on the web. But Expo Router is more than just a navigation library. It's actually a full-stack framework with server-side integrations. And in today's video, we'll touch on some of those too. In this crash course, I'm going to show you everything you need to know about Expo Router from zero. We'll start with a brand new application from scratch, navigating between screens, dynamic routes, layouts, stacks, tabs, and common patterns for nesting them in complex navigation flows. We'll cover router hooks, protected routes, and then go beyond the client to the server by learning Expo API routes and advanced patterns like middleware. If you're new here, I'm Beto. I spent years building mobile applications at Walmart, then at Expo as a developer success engineer, where I helped thousands of developers build production applications, and now I run Code with Beto full-time, where I help developers master mobile development. If you want to be part of the community, make sure to check out the weekly newsletter and Discord community, link in the description. Now, before we keep going, let me tell you about today's sponsor, modelcode.ai. So here's the thing, every developer I know has dealt with legacy code. You open your project, there's a file with a comment that says, do not touch. Classes nobody understands, business logic buried in some ancient database layer. And then you're suddenly stuck spending months refactoring someone else's dead old mess instead of building anything new. Now, you're probably already tried throwing Claude or ChatGPT at your legacy codebase, and that kind of works until it doesn't, because these models are general purpose AI tools and they weren't built for this. That's where Morph comes in. Morph is the world's leading generative AI platform built specifically to modernize legacy code bases. We are not talking about generic coding assistant. This is purpose built. Whether you are migrating from .NET 4.5 to .NET 10, LAMP stack to Python, web forms to React, Morph handles it. It analyzes your code base, maps everything out, plans the migration, executes it, tests it, and lets you approve every step before anything touches production. You can try it free with up to 50,000 lines of code. Just go to modelcode.ai/morph and use my code BETO to get 50% off your first year. That's almost $5,000 in savings. Link is in the description. And thanks to Model Code for sponsoring this video. All right, let's get started. All right, so let's just start by creating a brand new project. To create a new project, I'm going to run bunx create expo app using the template default at SDK 55. The reason why I'm passing the SDK 55 here is because it's my understanding that at the time that I'm recording this video, when you run it like this, it's gonna use Expo SDK 54 by default because Expo Go, the deployed version of Expo Go that you can download from the app stores, it's using 54. But since we're gonna be using everything in our computer with the simulator, we can just use SDK 55. And SDK 55 has first-class support for liquid glass and native Android tabs. So let's hit enter. We're gonna give it a name. Let's call it Expo Router Crash Course. Okay, project is ready. Let's open this in VS Code or Cursor, whatever you're using. Okay, so this is the default template. It's using Expo Router, super simple layout. Let's open the terminal and I'm going to start the server by running npx expo start. And let's run it on iOS. All right, so here I have my iPhone. It's using, by the way, iOS 18. So let me open this using iOS 26. By the way, if you press Shift I, you can select the simulator. So let's select iPhone 17 Pro. And here we have it. By the way, you can also do Shift A to select which Android device you want to run this project on. This is using iOS 26 with liquid glass support. We have the native tabs by default with the new template. This is how it looks. Something pretty annoying is this button. I'm going to just disable it. Yes, let's turn that off. Okay, we're good now. Yeah, so it's compatible with dark mode. liquid glass effect. Let's take a look and see how this would look like on Android by pressing Shift A in the terminal. All right, this is my only Android device. Let's select it. All right, and this is how the application looks like when we initialize it. So it already comes with Expo Router installed by default. And as you notice on Android, we're using the material tabs. We know that they are native because if you long press on one of them, you'll have native features like showing the name of the tab, Home and Explore. And on iOS, this will work the exact same way on older iOS versions, but without liquid glass, right? And liquid glass on the latest and greatest. Now, one thing that I want you to notice is that if we go to the package JSON, this is how Expo Router looks like. It's basically a package that your project has installed by default. First of all, we need to understand that all the screens and things that have to do with routing or Expo Router are gonna be inside the app folder, and you cannot change the name of this folder. So all the screens are gonna be here. Another thing to keep in mind is that components or any other files do not belong inside the app folder. So don't put them inside here, okay? This is just for screens, layouts, and indexes, okay? Now to keep things simple so that everyone understands, I'm going to open a new terminal and run a command called reset project and hit enter. And I'm gonna say yes. This basically is gonna simplify the entire application. And it's going to save the example here. By the way, I'm going to delete it. I don't want it. Now, this is where we defined everything, like how we want the screens to look, the groups that we have. We could have, I don't know, like a segment for authentication screens and then a segment for authenticated users inside the home screen. And then we have the actual entry point of this level in the app folder, which is the index.tsx. So the index file, we always need an index, which is the actual screen that is going to be rendered at the app level right here, okay? We have one level here. So this is the entry point, and this is what you can see here on screen. So in the layout, we can do configuration for the entire navigation. Like I said, we can set options. For example, I can pass the screen options and say header shown equal to false. All these options, by the way, in case you're familiar with React Navigation, which is what we used to use before Expo Router. Well, and I'm saying we used to use because now when you initialize a new project using Expo, it's using Expo Router by default. But that doesn't mean that people are not using React Navigation anymore. In fact, I created a video recently using React Navigation. It's a crash course as well in case you want to learn more. But basically, it's worth noting as well that Expo Router uses React Navigation under the hood. So all these options that you can see here, everything, all these types, if you are familiar with React Navigation, you'll notice that it's basically the same thing. The reason for that is because Expo Router uses React Navigation under the hood. And we can explicitly define the screens here and change the properties according to each screen. So by breaking this down like this gives us more flexibility to provide options and customization for each screen. So right now we're using a stack, and basically a stack screen is a set of screens that can be placed on top of each other. I'm going to show you some diagrams in a moment, but just keep that in mind. For now, I just quickly want to come here and create a new file inside the app folder. So when we do that, basically we're creating a screen. Let's create a screen called explore.tsx. It needs to be TSX and it needs to have an export. All right, and nothing has changed so far. I don't see my explore screen, but now this explore screen, it's actually part of the stack. And we can customize it even further by declaring it here. Let's put it in here and hit save. And yeah, so this means that within this stack, we can navigate between these two screens, right? So let me quickly show you how we can navigate. It's super simple. We can go to the index screen, which is the default screen because it's the index. It's like the main entry point of this segment of the navigation. And we can create a link. So link is coming from Expo Router and it's a component that allows you to navigate. This takes a property called href, which will take the string or the path for the route that we want to navigate to. The latest version of Expo Router comes with typed routes. I mean, this has been enabled for a while, and this is great because if the routes are typed just by creating a file, we have TypeScript type safety here, so I can select the screen that I want, and I know that it exists because the type is there. So let's give it a text here, a string explore. This is how it looks, super simple, but you can also pass a style and say something like font size 32, right? Let's press it, and this allows me to navigate to the explore screen. This is fully native. This means that we have gestures, so if I swipe left, this is going to work just great, right? And let's go back to the layout. Remember, this is where we define properties and customization for each screen. So I said that I didn't want it to show the header or the entire stack. So this means this is going to affect everything inside the stack. That's why I don't see the header in the explore screen. Let's hit save. And now I can see the header because that's the default behavior of the navigation. But I can customize it even further because I can now pass options at the stack level, right? I can define title like explore screen, just so that it's clear, right? This is the title. You can also define back style, header, back button display mode, and I like to use minimal. This is going to prevent showing the actual name of the previous screen on the stack, and it's just going to show the back button. You also notice that this is using liquid glass by default. That's the default native behavior. So let's take a look at previous versions or Android device. Let me refresh here in both. Here we have Android. Let's navigate to the Explorer. This is how Android looks like. This is the native behavior. You also get gestures like doing this and go back to the previous screen. That will work just fine. And on older iOS versions, we get the previous look, right? You also know that this is native because if you long press on these native buttons, you'll get like the history of the stack, right? Now it says index right now, and this is because the actual name of this screen is going to be the name of the file, but we can define it as well by giving it, just home, right? And just like that. If I come here and long press, it's going to say index, but let me refresh. And let's long press. And now it says home. Okay. So that's the basic navigation. So far, so good. But now we need to understand, this is super simple. Most real applications this is not enough, right? For real applications, and you're going to need complex navigation. This means authentication flows. This means onboarding screens, paywall screens that are accessible everywhere, and you're gonna want to segment the group of screens. I actually made a diagram that will help you understand what's going on with all the navigators that we can use here. So in most of your applications, you're gonna have a stack as the root navigator, right? And this stack, as you can see here, we can stack screens on top of each other. Like in this example, we have the home screen. And when we navigate to the Explorer screen, let's call it profile in this example here on the right, we are just stacking them. And from profile, you can go to details, and then you can navigate back. And what we're doing is just popping the screen. But with Expo Router, you can also use a tab navigator. And a tab navigator looks like this. Now, when you navigate between tabs, you are actually not stacking anything, right? These are completely different sections of the screen. This means if we were in the home stack and you wanted to go to the details screen, but if you are in the details tab, you would need to navigate back to the home screen, right? So right now we don't have any tabs, but just keep in mind that tabs are separate segments. You are not stacking them. But even though you can have, even though the tabs are separate, this means that if you need to have multiple screens accessible within a tab, you are gonna need a stack within a tab. And this is where nesting comes in. So the way nesting works is by putting a stack, by putting a navigator inside another navigator, right? So tabs, instead of having a screen here, we can actually have a stack, and vice versa, right? Instead of, let's take a look at the main stack. Instead of having just a screen here, this could actually be another stack, or it could also be a tab, right? Or it could be just a screen, like in this example. So it is possible to nest navigators, and this is going to be super useful as we start creating more complex navigations. So let's take a look at a more complex example. Let's say that your entry point, instead of being a stack, are tabs, right? And you're going to have 3 tabs, but each tab is going to have a stack of screens. So we have stack A, B, and C, and each stack has access to its own set of screens, right? And this is how it looks. And when the user changes tab, another tab is going to be active, and that unlocks access to the screens within that stack. Okay, and when you navigate to the tab C, let's say that this is the camera, you have access to the camera view, and then you can view a photo, right? But if you need to go to the details screen, you will need to press the home tab and then navigate to the details. So I hope that makes sense. In this case, in this example, the entry point are tabs, but you can also have a pretty complex stack as the entry point. And this is actually the main, I would say the main and the most common complex pattern using Expo Router. You have the main stack, which is what we have so far here on the left. And then you can have tabs as the entry point. And then each tab is going to have a stack inside each tab, right? So this is how it would look like. But this architecture is great because it allows you to present screens on top of the tabs, right? For example, things like the authentication or onboarding, you can present these screens or stack them on top of the tabs, right? All right, so I hope this really makes sense. Now let me show you how this actually would look like on the file structure of Expo Router. So to show you that, I'm going to show you Platano, which is one of our premium templates that we offer for our pro members. And this is a code base that it's pretty complex and it's pretty complete as well. It's basically using everything that Expo Router offers. And this is the application. This is how it looks. This is the hello world of the app. And you notice we're using tabs with different stacks, right? So if we take a look at the app folder on the left, remember the layout is the entry point, right? And in here, I have a stack, but this is a pretty complex stack because this stack has access to multiple navigators nested within them, right? So the first stack is going to be the onboarding, right? Right now you are looking at the tabs here because I already onboarded the user. By the way, we also can protect segments on routes, but don't pay too much attention to that because we haven't covered that yet. But let's go to the settings. I'm going to show you how this looks like from the onboarding, right? This is the home screen of the template. And what is happening here is that the onboarding is a segment of screens that you can take a look here as well, right? It's, by the way, just one screen. But when you have a layout inside this group, this means that this is going to have a navigator, right? And it's a stack. So it's a stack within a stack, right? If we go back to the layout, this is the main stack in my layout, and it's defining a new stack, which is the onboarding, right? So I can define properties here, like I don't want to show the header and things like that. So let's actually quickly go through the onboarding. All right, so this is the onboarding. Once I complete, I actually get presented with the paywall, but once I close it, by the way, the paywall is another stack, and this is good because this allows me to present the paywall anywhere. So if the user goes to generate a new generation, by the way, let me save this image, looks pretty cool. And in here, I don't know, maybe let me just say test, submit. This is going to present the paywall. So making these kind of things allows you to access the paywall from within the tabs, right? Because this lives at the root level. So this is a stack, and you can stack them on top of the tabs. Keep in mind, every time that you see a layout inside a folder, that means that's a navigator. And to see which type of navigator, just click on the layout, and this is a stack. Or it could be, if you click on the folder, then go to the layout, you're going to see what is this. This is a tab navigator. This is how it looks. We're going to learn more about this in a moment, but just know that to know how this is nested, you just go to the layout at the level of the folder that you want to learn, right? And this is pretty complex because the tabs are inside the stack, but each tab, it's its own stack. And let me show you. If I go to the home folder, let's go to the layout here. This is a new stack, right? And then you can also have even more folders like this. And in this case, I don't have a layout. But what's happening here is that if I don't define a layout here, if I say layout here, I'm creating basically a new stack navigator or tab navigator, whatever you want to nest here. But if you just group screens like that, that's also possible. But remember, you also need an index screen, right? So for the generation, the index or the entry point, and this is basically the screen that you're taking, that you are looking here. Oops, and I save this again. Yeah, okay. Anyways, when you are here in the generation stack, you can actually navigate to different screens. So the generation segment here, it's not a stack because it lives within the layout, and it also has access to the action sheet, which is a different screen, or the camera view, which is a different screen. The preview is basically when you click on them, this is the preview screen. And when you press this plus button, this is actually navigating to a different screen with the form sheet presentation. And that is how it looks. By the way, this is also compatible with dark mode. In case you want to check it out, by the way, you can just go to Code with Beto, and it's in the resources. It's called Platano Template. It's, by the way, available for early access at a nice discount right now. Just run this command, super easy to use. It will work the first time and ship your application. It's optimized for AI image apps. Oh, let me actually get out of full screen here. It's optimized for AI image apps. It also works on Android beautifully, but honestly, it's so good that I'm going to be using it for any other app that I'm shipping to the stores, any real application. It already comes with payments integrated. And by the way, it comes with a free open source in case you're interested or need assets for your screenshots. It comes with, we open sourced the Figma template, so you can generate quickly your assets for the stores. This is how it looks. Just drop your image, and it also works on Google Play. So screenshots definitely will save you a day. In case you want to learn more, just go to the Platano tab on codewithbeto.dev. My website is in the description. But yeah, this is definitely one of the best examples that I can show you right now. And this code base is the best I've created in my entire career. So this is how a very complex Expo Router segments and screens and nesting navigators would look like, right? So now that we know what is actually possible, let's actually break it down and start implementing it in our current example. All right, so let me bring my iPhone 17 Pro with iOS 26. Let's open this in Expo Go. All right, so this is what we have. Now let's nest some navigators, right? Since I want to create tabs, let's go ahead and create a new folder to group the tabs, right? And I'm gonna use parentheses now. You might be wondering, why are you using parentheses? And that's a good question, and the answer is here. So a directory with its name surrounded by parentheses indicates a route group. And these directories are useful for grouping routes together without affecting the URL. So that's actually another thing that I forgot to mention. All right, so let me explain how this is working right now. So far, we only have the entry point of the application. So you can think of it as the path is going to be index. But since the index is the entry point of my application, you actually don't need to type index. And just by doing slash, you're gonna navigate to the home screen. But then we also have the explore, right? So if we do slash explore, then you have the route. That's the path. That's how you navigate, right? And we are already navigating. If you go to the index, we said, you can see it here. Slash nothing, that means go home. And slash explore, that means navigate to the explore screen, right? Index, we don't need to mention it, just slash. It's the entry point. But sometimes you want to keep things simple, right? So you can create the tabs folder without parentheses, but that means that when you want to navigate to the tabs, you will need to say tabs home or something like that. But in this case, since I want the tabs to be my actual home screen or the entry point, you can use parentheses. That means that the file name, in this case, for example, home, will have a settings route for its URL. You can basically skip this from the URL. So when you say tabs, you can just say slash home, and this is going to navigate to the home screen, or slash settings. That it's just a convenience, and it's going to work just way better. Now, we want to have a navigator here. So what do? We create a layout.tsx. This is where we define a navigator. We are going to need an entry point for these segments of screens. So what do? We create an index.tsx inside this folder, right? So what kind of navigator we want to use here? These are tabs, right? So let's import native tabs. Let me bring an Expo Router here. All right, and then here we can say export default tabs layout, because this is the entry point. And basically we are doing the same thing, but we actually want to use the tabs that are native. So if we go to the tabs here in Platano, we are using native tabs, and you can import these by using the unstable native tabs. So let's actually replace it, because this one, it's using the JavaScript implementation of the tabs, the old version basically. So if you want to use it, go ahead, but the cool stuff with Liquid Glass, it's under native tabs, right? And the way we define this now, it's going to be native tabs dot, we have trigger, we have other properties, but the one we care about, it's actually just trigger. So let's define these two. We have index and explore, but my explore screen is outside of the folder, right? So what I want to do is actually, let's just duplicate explore. I'm going to copy and paste inside my folder. And let's call this one profile screen, right? Let's rename this, be profile, save. Now let's define the screen inside the layout. Instead of explore, this is going to be profile. I only have two tabs, home, which is index, and then profile. Notice that this is inside the tabs folder, okay? Since now I want this main tab, let me actually create the screen here. Copy this, and let's call this home or index. Doesn't really matter. Let's just close it. And then we can go to the layout. That's index, that's profile. Everything looks okay. But now in my main layout, instead of saying that I want to go to an index file, that is this one right here, that is not my entry point anymore. I want to navigate to the tabs, right? This means that the entry point is going to be tabs, and since tabs has an index, this is what is going to be rendered here. Okay, so what happens if I now come here and reload? Okay, so we can see the same index that we had before, and we can navigate. So basically, I don't see the tabs. Nothing is happening. Why is that? The reason for that is because the main entry point, it's always going to be the index. So even if I say that I want my entry point to be tabs or define tabs here, Expo Router is defining another stack screen under the hood that is the index. Why is doing that? Because we created a file called index. Okay, so since we created this file, this is the entry point, and we no longer want this. So what we do, we delete it, right? That's not the entry point anymore. So we remove it, and what's happening here is that Expo Router is going to index our folders until it finds an index. So it's going to go inside the tabs and it's going to find the index here, and this is what is going to render, and this is what you can see on screen. Okay, so let's refresh. Okay, the tabs are there, looks okay. We can switch between profile and index, but it looks a bit awkward, right? It looks like we are missing some icons and stuff. But before I start customizing this, let's see how it's going to look on Android. Let's see. Let's refresh. Let's take a quick look. Okay, this is how it looks on Android. So it looks a bit strange, right? This is because everything is inside a stack, right? This stack. So let's define some options. Yeah, they're shown false. Okay, we don't want to show this, right? This is going to be handled within the navigators. Okay, that looks way better. Let's take a look on Android. Now it looks way better, right? We are doing things right. It looks native. Okay, so now let's actually define the header, right? Let's say that we actually want the header. So where do we do that? That would be inside the index in here, because this main layout, or you can also do it here, by the way, if you want to show the header or the tabs, you can say true here. But now this header is coming from the tabs and it's going to look okay, right? You can do this here, or you can do this inside a specific screen. So let's say that we only want to show the header in the profile screen. Let's go to the profile. And you can also set properties within the screen level by using the same stack. So let me show you how. You wrap your screen. Oops. You wrap your screen like this, and then you import stack from Expo Router, and then dot screen, and then you pass options like this. Now for this one, I want to show the header, so we would use the property header shown equal to true. Okay. Now I actually have to go here. Yeah, since I'm saying that I don't want to use the header here, I actually need to set the header shown to be true here. And now I can see the home header. But the issue here is that since this is a leafed screen in the tree of screens, we actually don't have a stack that we can customize here. And these are tabs. So that's why you create a stack within a tab, right? This is pretty limiting. So that's why you create a stack. This is why inside the tabs in Plátano, we have folders, because we want to have access and customize the headers. And the way to do that is using a stack, right? So let's do that. I'm going to create now a new folder. It's going to be my home. I don't want to affect the route, so I'm going to just use parentheses. And now the entry point, I want to move it inside this home, right? This means that now the index here, it's going to be home, like that, right? And now inside home, I can define a new layout.tsx, which is going to be a stack. So let's copy the main stack and let's go to the layout here, paste it. And this is going to be now the home layout, and it's going to define the screens that we want to access within the home tab. So for now, let's just leave index, right? Okay, this is the only screen, hit save. Now inside the layout, we need to pass the home. Let's refresh. Okay, and now this is working great. And we can basically do the same for the profile. So I'm going to copy and paste, rename this to be profile. And this is, again, guys, it's gonna be a new stack. So it needs an index. Let's change the name to be profile. And this is going to be profile stack. Layout, sorry. Okay, let's change this to be profile. Well, it could be index or profile, doesn't really matter. Okay, now we have two stacks nested within the tabs. So let's go to the tabs and let's define this in here by doing this. Okay, so now at the main layout, I want to hide this stack, right? And now you can see that each one has its own stack. So by doing this, we just gain more customization. So we can do things like changing the title here or changing it directly within the index like I was doing it before. Let me show you. Let's say that we want to add some special things here in the profile. So we would wrap this and let's bring this stack from Expo Router. Like that, hit save. So let's change this to be false, for example. And now it's respecting what we're doing because we actually have a stack, right? We nested a stack. So suddenly, you know, this is pretty, I guess, suddenly we're full of files here, but this navigation at this point is pretty useful and customizable. We can do more things here, like we can have, let me remove this. We can have, for example, a header right. Let's create a button and let's bring this from React Native. Let's see if we can see that here. Yeah, now we are not showing the header of the profile. What happened to that? Yeah, as you can see, you can get confused, but if you refresh, sometimes you need to refresh, especially if you change the layout or create files here, just always refresh. And now we have this button here and it looks nice on iOS 26. And let's take a look at other versions. Let's refresh. See how this looks on Android. Oh God, this button is super annoying. Let's turn it off. And I can see the edit, right? This looks a bit off. Like it's behind the status bar. That's normal in my experience. Once you run this on a real device, it will look okay. Okay, so don't worry about that. But yeah, we have the button and you can do things like that. So let's take a look at the iOS 18. iOS 18 should look like, yeah, like it looked previously. This is okay. This is nice. You can do things like this, right? You can start customizing, adding stuff. Now let's actually see how we can add the icons to the tabs because they look pretty bad. So let's go to the layout of the tabs. This is how we define them. So to define the icon, we create the trigger like this. But let me copy this from Plátano. I'm going to replace the home here. And this is a string. Just home like that. So you have native tabs, dot trigger, and then you can do dot label and pass the actual label, in this case home. But you can also do that with icon and then define the SF symbol and drawable for Android. So now we have a beautiful icon here. And let's steal another one. Let's steal the settings. I'm just going to copy this line. So basically, instead of having this self-closing tag, you would close it like this and then have the label and icon like that. And now this looks super nice. The API is super clean, super composable. And if we go back to other platforms, let me refresh on Android. Now this looks nice, right? Amazing. And on Android, older versions, sorry, iOS, older versions, it looks okay. Nice. And of course, you can customize this. You can pass properties here. Not that, but you can pass things like background color, right? Let's say red. This is going to affect, I think, Android only. Some of them are Android only, and you can know that just by hovering it. Okay, background color. What else we have here? You can pass the property hidden, which could be useful, especially if you don't want to show the tab on specific screens. You can always check the route and validate maybe, and you don't show the tab, right? So for example, right now, let's say that we want to navigate to, let's try to do something similar like on Plátano. This is my home screen. I want to navigate to the generation tabs, and we actually have this beautiful transition you can see here. And if you notice, the tabs are being hidden. That's something that I'm using here. And when I navigate back, the tabs appear. This is because this is a nested screen. So let's navigate to Expo Go. Let's try to achieve something similar. Let's create a new screen inside the home. Let's call it generation.tsx. And let's copy this. Generation, cool. Now let's define it here. Great. You can define some things like they're shown, right? And actually this should be true for everyone, and just we can remove it from individually. Okay, so now I can navigate from home to generation. So let's go to the home screen. We can do that, or we can have a stack screen, right? Options. And let's define a header right. Yeah, let me import header right. Let's create a button from React Native that says generate, and we can navigate. Apart from using link, we already saw how to use link. We can navigate using a hook called use router that we can import from Expo Router. So let's grab this bad boy here, and in this function I'm gonna say router.push, and again we have type safety. And if you pay close attention, we have the generation. We can specify the entire path like that. This will work. But since we added parentheses, we can remove this from here and just say /generation, and this will also work. And it's just way cleaner. We also have type safety. And yeah, so it's showing the entire path, but also you can just say /generation. Okay, and this is how we navigate. You notice we get this nice animation, this nice transition. Now on the generation screen, I don't want to show the home, right? We already learned how to do that. So we can define another stack screen options here within the screen, or we can just go to the layout and define here the minimal button, right? There we have it, super clean. Let's take a look on Android. We have the generate, navigate. We can also do gestures like this, and older versions as well. But if you pay close attention, when we navigate to the generate, we are still seeing the tabs, right? And that's okay. That could be nice to have, right? You navigate, because since these tabs are native, when you press on the home, it actually navigates back, which is cool. But sometimes you don't want them here. So what you can do is just hide them. In this case, you can also check the path that you are navigating right now. So let's see. So we can say path equal to use path name from Expo Router. And let's put this in the console. Let's open the console. And you saw it there, it said generation. Let me hit save again. Let's see if I can bring it here. So that's a current path generation. So what you would do here is just you can validate actually this inside the tabs, because this is where we want to hide the tabs, right? Let's go here. Then let's grab the path. Let's put it in the console because I wonder how this is going to look here. Let's bring this from Expo Router. I'm gonna say false for now. Hit save. Okay. Generation. Let me just refresh to see if that's true. Okay. Let's navigate to the generate. Okay. So that means that if this is equal to generation, then we want to hide them, right? There we go. So if we navigate back, they are going to appear. And if we navigate, they disappear. Sometimes this is useful. It depends on what you want to do. You can also hide them individually by passing the property on each tab. Now, I want to show you another pretty cool concept of Expo Router that are protected routes. And we already saw it actually on Plátano. We are actually protecting some routes, and we're protecting them in the main layout. Yeah, you can use stack.protected. So let me show you how we can do that here. This is my entry point. Let's say stack.protect. All right, and just like that, we can wrap. And this protected is going to take a property called guard. And as you can see here, this property is going to guard this screen. So let's see. I want to say just true. This is a boolean. Okay, true. Let's change this to be false. Notice what happened. So basically, we can have something like const is authenticated or is protected. The most common one is going to be is authenticated. And if it's authenticated, if it's authenticated, let me refresh. Yeah, if it's not authenticated. So basically you can do things like this. If the user is not authenticated, you can guard the tabs. This means you are not going to show anything, any screen, because the user is not authenticated. But in that case, what is going to happen here is that Expo Router is going to grab the extra screens that you have here. So instead of having Explore, you can actually have more complex, like a different stack or different tabs, different application entirely, right? So let's just keep Explore, but you can actually have something like the onboarding that I'm having here in Plátano. This is a segment that is going to show the onboarding in the case the user is not onboarded yet. So this would be like my home screen or onboarding, whatever, authentication screens, whatever you need. But I recommend that if you are protecting with a validation like that, just copy the same and just add the negation here and be specific that if this is false, then load this. And if this is true, then load this, right? So what happens if I change this to be true? Automatically, we replace the navigator. And by replacing, I mean this is completely unmounted. It disappears. So if you try to navigate back with gestures and things like that, there's nothing there. There are no screens. And some mistakes that I've seen some beginners made is that they navigate, right? Instead of replacing or instead of protecting. because if you navigate, let's say that this is my login screen, right? And I authenticate and I go to the home screen. This is the home screen. Even if you hide the back button, I can still swipe left and go back to the login screen. I've seen this thousands of times in production applications. So you don't do that, okay? You just replace the navigator. That's why you have multiple navigators, one for the home screen for authenticated users or just the regular users. And you can also have another segment, and these are going to be just flows, like authentication flow, used one time. So you don't need access all the time, only when the user is not authenticated. Onboarding flow, only one time when the user opens the app for the first time. And things like that, okay? Those are protected routes in a nutshell, super easy. So at this point, we actually have a pretty complex navigation setup in our project. But one thing that I want to show you, a pretty cool thing that you can do now with Expo Router is using a bottom item. So let me show you. I actually have an example here. And you can check it out as well. If you go to my blog, by the way, I'm pushing a lot of blogs here, so definitely make sure to come here and check it out. If you search for Expo Router, I recently created this Expo Router blog and basically breaking down all the new features specifically for iOS. So I want to show you the stack toolbar. So the stack toolbar, it's going to allow you to have header items like that, but it also takes a position bottom, which allows you to have things like this. I'm using this in my AI tattoo application, and I actually have an example here. So the link for this blog is going to be in the description, but basically I wanted to show you the syntax of how this would look like, right? Let's copy this example. And as you notice, this is actually being handled inside the screen. And this is iOS only, by the way, so we need to implement a different thing for Android, but it's definitely worth having for iOS only. So right now I have this header right, and then I navigate to the generation. This is where I want my stuff. So let's wrap this like this, and then let's paste this in here. Let me bring stack from Expo Router. All right, and this is basically how it looks. Yeah, let's define router from Expo Router. Great. So I don't have, of course, these functions, so let's just create an empty function like that. Yeah, I don't need to pass an compressor. Let's just pass an empty function just in case. Then you can also define the toolbar view. So this is basically how it works. Stack toolbar. You set the placement, left, right, or bottom, right? This is the bottom one. Set show tab view. Maybe we can create this state here. Yep, let's bring this from React. Let's bring the pressable from React Native. And here, I'm actually displaying a date. This is a text that I was using. This on press, it's gonna be an empty. Okay, so let's hit save. Boom, just like that. This is a game changer. Doing this before, it was impossible. And the latest version of Expo Router comes with a toolbar and the placement button. It's absolutely crazy. And the thing is that when you press, for example, this. Okay, so if I set this to toggle the actual view of the toolbar, look at that. So we have native transitions. So when I press, basically what I'm doing is toggling this variable to true and false, and then we are hitting and showing the button. But on top of buttons, you can also have a custom view, which is my pressable that is showing the details. And in my AI tattoo application, this actually looks way better here. This is how it looks. You can actually show useful information or even open a bottom sheet using these kind of properties. And now it's possible just with this simple syntax. Keep in mind that this is only available for iOS at the time, but definitely worth taking advantage of. And you can also customize the position. So for example, here I'm specifically using a custom icon for navigating back. But if you want, you can just use, for example, I don't know, something like crash, right? Just keep in mind, again, this is just iOS only. You would need to implement something similar for Android. You can change the placement to be right, and it's gonna do the same thing. So the cool thing about this is that we also get this nice transition between screens, and the navigation looks like this. Yep, super cool, something to keep an eye on. Now, I think at this point we covered so much information. I hope you are following along with me, or just at least watching to be aware of these things, because it's very important. Now, another very important thing that I want to cover about Expo Router in this video is the ability to have server-side code. So, as I said at the beginning, Expo Router is a full stack framework. And let me create a new folder called API. It's super simple. If you have used Next.js with API routes, basically the same thing. If you have used Cloudflare workers, basically the same thing. And by the way, Expo Router API routes are deployed to Cloudflare workers, so keep that in mind. It's not a Node.js environment, but a worker environment, okay? API routes are super easy to get started. And the way you do that is just by creating a new file, call hello or whatever your API name is, plus API. So the plus API tells Expo Router that this file is not a route, but an API, right? So .ts, not tsx, because this is just TypeScript code. And you would have something like this: export function get, then return the response. This could also be post, or, you know, patch. I think you can have patch, get, remove, delete. Yeah, this is the basic example. From here, you just hit the endpoint. But before you do that, you just gotta make sure that in the app.json, in the Expo Router section here, you need to set the output. Where is the output? Yeah, you need to change, sorry, it's under web. You need to set the output to be server, okay? After you do that, I recommend that you restart the server. And here we have it. I actually had a warning that it was telling me you need to set it to server. Let's start the server, npx expo start. Right, and this should work now. I have my API route, and we should be able to hit it, right? This is gonna be under hello. This is the path, API hello, right? Because we have an API folder. All right, so let's go to the home screen here, and let's declare a function hit API. All right, this looks okay. Let's create a button that actually will hit the API, and then let's put the response in the console. Okay, that's what we're doing here. I recommend actually that you use, of course, async. Let's change this to be const response equal to await fetch. Grab the response.json, put it in the console. Now this is actually wrong because it's hitting 3000 and we should hit 8081. So let's change this. API/hello, everything else looks okay. Let me refresh the app. Let's open the console and hit the API, and we get the response, right? In Next.js, I think you can just say /API like that, and that will work. I think this will also work here, by the way. But I'm actually not sure if this will work in production. So what I recommend doing in this case, when you are working with API routes, and I'm actually doing this on Plátano, we have 3 main APIs. These APIs are pretty complex because they're dealing with nano banana image generation models and stuff like that. But basically, what I recommend doing is creating an environment variable. So let's create a new file, .env.local. So what I recommend doing here is just creating a public variable, Expo public API URL. This is very useful. Just keep in mind that once you deploy this, you're gonna want to change this, right? To be, I don't know, like my website, codeviveto.dev. This would be my base URL once I deploy. But in localhost, it's going to be localhost 8081. So let's hit save. And then instead of having this like that, I recommend that you always say an Expo public API URL. And you can abstract this logic so that it's automatically handled for you each time that you do a fetch request. But yeah, this is how it looks. You can hit the API, get the response, and then show it on screen. This will also work on Android. Let's bring it in here. Let's refresh. Let's hit the API 2 times. Yep, and we have an issue on Android. The reason for that is because Android actually requires the actual IP address in localhost or to use an HTTPS server. But if you take a look on iOS, it worked. Okay, cool. All right, so another thing that I want to show you on the API, of course, you can do server-side things here. This is where you would want to communicate with third-party APIs like Nano Banana or ChatGPT or fetch from your database. This is the place, okay? Don't do it on the client side. This is server. And yeah, you can do console log, I don't know, server API call, right? Let's hit it. We get this server log. I recommend, by the way, that you tag your logs on the server, something like this, so that you know that this is from the server. Now, when you are working on the server, right now, this API is not protected. Once you deploy it, you're gonna need to check authentication and things like that. And for that, actually, Expo Router also supports a middleware. For those who don't know, a middleware is basically, in simple terms, it's a function or a piece of code that is called before your API is hit. Okay, so let's say that I do a request to my API. First of all, before we actually process the API request, we might want to check something, right? Like if the user is authenticated or the request is authorized to actually hit our API, or maybe you want to log something in your dashboard like usage or increase the count of API calls that the user has made so far. So in that case, having a middleware is very handy. The way you create a middleware is just by using the syntax plus middleware.ts, like that. And I have a middleware in my Plátano template. And I'm gonna show you how I'm doing it. Basically, let me copy this. This is how you handle the middleware. That's it. If I remember correctly, I actually need to enable a flag. But we can quickly go to the middleware docs. You can enable it by setting the output to server, and then we need to say unstable, use server middleware in the plugin. So let's go to the app.json. Inside the plugin, on Expo Router, I'm going to wrap this on an array like this. And then I'm going to pass options. And then I can paste this in here. Okay. So since I'm changing the app.json, we need to restart the server. Yep. And let's refresh the app. Let's actually save the middleware. And what I'm going to do here is just say console.log request.url, right? Let's hit save. Oh, by the way, let's tag this as a log from the middleware. That's a good practice, so you know what's going on. Let's hit it. And if you notice, I think I saw something related to the middleware. Okay, and if you pay attention, the middleware was bundled when we hit the API. But actually, because I copy pasted some of the settings for the middleware, this is not going through because I'm actually filtering only for post request. And this is a security measurement that I'm doing on the template Plátano because I don't want people hitting my API. So I'm just protecting it on the API folder. So you can actually pass a pattern. This means that the API routes are specific. The middleware is going to be protecting specifically the API folder and any path, okay? So anything that I put inside the API folder, it's going to be, the middleware is going to run before we hit, okay? So you can protect this by saying, okay, I want to allow post and get request, right? So now if I hit the API, you can see that now I get the middleware log, right? So I don't want to handle post requests in this case. So let's just keep the get and boom. So the middleware, this is where you would check authentication, like I said before, and you can grab stuff from the request gathers, for example, and check for a specific variable. And if that is false or that is different from what you expect, just return a response, right? Something like that. Auth failed, right? Let's see. Yeah, you would return like a 401 like that. Let's hit the API. Okay. And as you know, and as you can see, unauthorized, right? I'm not validating anything right now, but this is how it would look like when you protect your API. This is clean because we are doing this in the middleware instead of validating authentication in the route directly. So once you know that you are protecting this API route, you can just handle the logic here, because at this point we know that the user is authenticated or we know that the middleware has ran. I go into more detail in the members only videos. I have actually a series of Expo Router videos in case you want to learn more about a specific topic like role-based authentication or dynamic route, deep linking, authentication flows. Definitely consider becoming a member of this channel. By the way, I want to take this opportunity to thank our members. Thank you so much for your support. And yeah, your support actually allows me to keep creating content like this. Thank you so much. If you want to actually ship quick, I recommend that you check out Plátano. It's the code base that we were using for grabbing examples. Very easy to get started. You just run this command and skyfold a new project. It comes with Figma assets so you can ship quick and access to the Discord community so that I can help you ship your application faster. We're actually shipping a couple of AI Nano Banana wrappers, so I would love if you can join us. With that, my friends, that's it for this video. I hope you learned something new. Thank you to modelcode.ai for sponsoring this video. Make sure to check them out. Link is in the description. If you want to learn more about Expo Router, check out this other video. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next one.